in this episode. That being episode 252 of the In the Tank podcast, we're going to be covering Joe Biden's climate plans and maybe even getting a little bit deeper into that on episode 252 of the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Joining me today, I have got Justin Haskins, editorial director at the Heartland Institute and co-czar of the Stopping Socialism Project. How you doing, sir?
I'm kind of regretting that we have co-czars. I mean, can you have a co-czar?
Yeah, that's kind of...
Isn't czar, like, by definition one? It's like having co-kings or something, right? We got to work on that. That's a problem.
There's a Tenacious D song about that.
Co-popes. What is it, Isaac Orr, research fellow at the Center of the American Experiment?
Well, hey, all you cats and kittens.
Cool cats and kittens.
Cool cats and kittens.
Yeah, just like 4 months late on that reference. That's great. Good job, Isaac. You really...
I saw them singing a birthday song to somebody on Instagram the other day, and I was like, oh, man, I hate her so much.
She's doing real well.
I know she is.
Well, yeah.
Talking about Carol Baskin.
Yeah,
Carol.
She's doing great. She bought Joe's zoo, and she
was awarded it in court.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she didn't buy it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because they owed him all that money. Right?
Meanwhile, good-for-nothing Donald Trump commutes Roger Stone's sentence, but he's got nothing for Joe Exotic? Come on.
Really did not see that coming.
That was a hot take right there. That was pretty good.
That
one.
That would be a great op-ed for, like, Breitbart. You should do that op-ed for sure. That would kill on Breitbart.
Oh, that would be great. Good for nothing.
Isaac,
yeah,
I think you said that you were gonna. We'll get to Joe Biden's plan. We'll take our time getting there, but you said that you were gonna, indulge in some cancel culture against Burger King.
Yeah, forget Burger King. Have you seen their awful new music video about reducing methane emissions from their cows?
They have music videos?
It's a kid singing a song with a guitar, and I hate that the song is catchy. I've only watched it the one time because I don't want it to get stuck in my head. But yeah, they're talking about how they feed lemongrass to the cows that they use to make their burgers, and that's why they're reducing the amount of methane. Even though if any of these morons read Schellenberger's book, they'd know that only 4% of all greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture. So it's really pointless to feel like you're making a difference by eating a lemongrass burger. So yeah, I'm not happy. I'm canceling it. Yeah, that's all they're doing. And they're saying it's not like a meat replacement. They're just feeding the cows lemongrass that reduces their methane emissions by about a third.
Well,
stupid.
So I'm looking at this music video now.
Yeah.
It's got a kid dressed up all in a white suit, a white cowboy suit. I've never seen a cowboy wear all white suit, but he's dressed up in a cowboy suit. He's probably
clearly
11 years old or something. And it really is it's a music video about cows and methane. There's no question about it. That's what it is. There's fake cows with fake methane clouds made of cotton flying up in the air.
Without getting a copyright strike.
No, we're not going to play it.
It's only 2 minutes. It's only 2 minutes long.
Yeah, we don't want to do a. Oh wait, here.
No.
It starts off with a cow's rear side that's made into a saloon door.
Oh.
All right, I've only seen literally 1 second of it now, and I don't want to see the rest. So
no,
it is pretty catchy song. I will.
I know it. I hate how catchy the song is.
Yeah, if you like country music, watch out because this song will get you. This song will just consume your life. Yeah.
Isaac, you mentioned our Michael Schellenberger episode of In the Tank, which surpassed 10,000 views on YouTube.
I didn't. I just mentioned what he said in his book. I didn't say anything about the episode, Donnie.
Well, that's true, but you mentioned him.
That was kind of a rough transition.
Which made me think of it. 10,000 views, which is by far on YouTube our most viewed episode. If you haven't watched that episode, you should check it out. But no audience for those that are really constant listeners. That does not mean that I'm cutting my hair.
You said that.
No, I did not.
Yes, you did.
Incorrect.
You are a liar.
I went back and looked at it. You can find it. It's one of the first 2 or 3 episodes we did on YouTube. And I said that if we got 10,000 views on our newest episode, so by the time that it reached its threshold, that 10,000 threshold, we already had a newer episode.
You're stupid. I hate you right now.
Yeah, this is why...
You're a coward.
Honestly, this is why America is failing and falling behind.
So
it's because people are not holding true to their words.
That is my word.
Yeah, but it's a technicality.
It's
a technicality.
It is against the spirit of your thing. Your whole reason for this was to promote the show, right?
Incorrect.
So
yes, that's true. That's true. But if it were to reach that 10,000 mark like 4 days earlier, then I would have done it.
It's arbitrary cutoff.
That is not arbitrary. It's
yes, it is.
This episode comes out.
This is unbelievable.
We are so off the rails. See, this is like we have Jim.
Angrily tweet at Donnie at In the Tank Pod.
Yeah, or on Parler at Stopping Socialism. So,
you know what, everybody? It's time to unfollow In the Tank because of Donnie's just awful.
Yeah.
His inability to keep his word.
I kept it.
Yeah, but you didn't.
No. You
but you did. You know what? I agree. Let's unfollow him.
Let's take a vote. Me, Justin, and Donnie.
This is not a democracy.
I think it is.
No. All right.
Yeah. Unfollow him on everything.
Yeah.
There we go.
Cancel Donnie.
That's what we need right there.
Cancel Donnie until he cuts his hair.
Agreed. Yes.
If this episode reaches
it doesn't even look
10,000,
good. I don't know why you're so attached to it.
Oh,
so wait a minute. So if this episode reaches 10,000 before when?
Before the next episode comes out. It's very easy to understand.
Okay.
I don't know why you're having trouble.
I kind of get it because you don't want to say, well, like if it takes a year to get to 10,000, then I have to I understand that.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
Come on.
You just don't want to do it.
I'll do it. It's just got to.
You don't want to do it. You won't do it even if it does happen.
You know what? It's fine. It's fine, Isaac. I've got a plan.
Biden's plan.
I've got a plan.
Is it better than Joe Biden's plan for energy?
You've got a plan, Justin? That scares me.
Yeah, you should be scared because usually my plans work. So.
Justin and I are going to do it.
We'll get it to 10,000, Isaac. Don't worry.
Heck yeah.
We'll do it with the stupid rules. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. And then we'll get to name Donnie's kid, too.
Was that also part of it? I don't remember.
It is now. It is now.
That was not part of it.
Hey, you know what? Mrs. Kendal thinks I'm the best part of In the Tank, so I'm pretty sure she'll be down for it.
That's true. That is true.
All right.
Joe Biden, the presumptive candidate for the Democratic Party for president, he just came out with his climate plans. Apparently, he had one on his website for a while. So I've got 2 different little packets of info here. One that is the Biden's plan for a clean energy revolution and environmental justice. And I think this has been on his website for a little while. But then he just recently came out with the Biden plan to build a modern, sustainable infrastructure and equitable, clean energy future. So I don't really know how you guys want to tackle all of this because the latter document is broken down into several parts. He says here, this is at the beginning, it says Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan ensures that coming out of this profound public health and economic crisis and facing the persistent climate crisis, we are never caught flat-footed again. We will launch a national effort aimed at creating the jobs we need to build a modern, sustainable infrastructure now and deliver an equitable, clean energy future. Biden will make $2 trillion accelerated investment with a plan to deploy those resources over his first term, setting us on an irreversible course to meet the ambitious goal, climate progress that science demands.
Nothing really excites me like the word irreversible. No going back, guys. This is it.
That's
It
right.
doesn't matter. Even if it doesn't work, it's irreversible. We're never coming back.
That's right.
What a stupid thing to do. Why would you call it irreversible? Oh my God, what an idiot.
So it says the key elements of the Biden plan to build a modern, sustainable infrastructure and equitable, clean energy future, blah, 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 blah. 7 different parts. So number 1, build a modern infrastructure. Number 2, position the U.S. auto industry to win the 21st century with technology invented in America. Number 3, achieve a climate pollution-free power sector by 2035. Number 4, make dramatic investments in energy and efficiency in buildings, including completing 4 million retrofits and building 1.5 million new affordable homes. Number 5, pursue a historic investment in clean energy innovation. Number 6, advance sustainable agricultural and conservation. And number 7, secure environmental justice and equitable economy opportunity. So then the rest of this document kind of just breaks down each and one of those 7 main points and kind of elaborates on each and every one of those. But just off the top, let's go to Isaac Orr, because you wrote an article for the Center of the American Experiment titled Biden's New Energy Plan is Terrible. So you didn't mince your words there. So just right off the top, what are your thoughts about having such a long document like this?
Oh, well, I mean, it's great fodder for the Trump campaign. Not that I don't know if any of this will matter, because I think COVID's going to be what everything is about. But basically everything that Biden wrote on his plan is stupid. It just is. Like, anybody who reads Schellenberger's book is going to go through this and be like, oh, none of this makes any sense. This is all actually wrong. And that's like one of the most fun things about being like a free market energy and environment person right now, is because like we're basically right on everything. And for some reason, we're not seen that way. And I think that the more we adopt the left's position on this stuff, the more obvious it has to get. So in my article at americanexperiment.org, encourage you guys all to look it over. There are several really
probably shared it on Twitter under your handle at the fracking guy too, I'm sure.
I haven't yet, but I will right now. Actually, should I boycott Twitter at this moment and only post it? Is this exclusively on Parler?
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not going to do that.
All right, I derailed you. Go ahead.
Okay. But anyway, basically, this is a slightly watered down version of the Green New Deal. The only material difference between this and the Green New Deal that I can see are this does not ban fracking on private land, even though you know that they're going to try and regulate it out of existence like the Obama administration did. It doesn't immediately call for destroying all of our nuclear power, which is 20% of all the electricity that we generate and is more than wind and solar. But that's it. Those are the lone nods to sanity in this. And so you're looking at 100% carbon-free electric grid by 2035, spending hundreds of billions of dollars on wind turbines, solar panels, and battery storage. There's a plan to make all the school buses in the country electric, which is hilarious. And I wrote about that the other day. I wanted to title that "The Tragic School Bus," with just like a meme of Miss Frizzle with like the red eyes, the demon eyes with like Liz over her shoulder.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, there's a dedication to money-losing energy efficiency projects, which is great. Subsidizing electric vehicles and building EV charging stations. So this is basically like a kid's wish list on Christmas to Santa Claus, only that wish list is more realistic. So, yeah. So basically, nobody has to read my article anymore because they just rattled it off.
No, look, it's full of all these cool charts and stuff. Like, you got to check this out. Look at these things.
So the things that I would like
to
stress about this plan is the $2 trillion that they plan to spend is only the federal government's expenditure. It is not what it's actually going to cost everyday people, because this is going to greatly increase the cost of electricity. And let me see here. So, and also, like, what's the benefit? Anytime that a politician says that they're going to spend your money, they should have to tell you what you're going to get for it. But when you look at what Pat Michaels, who's a climate scientist at Competitive Enterprises Institute, has basically calculated if we entirely wiped off the United States from the face of the earth, it would avert like 0.137 degrees Celsius by 2100, which you can't even measure. Basically this plan wants to just expand all the renewable energy mandates in the country to the point to where we have 100% clean energy. But if you were actually going to try and accomplish this by only using wind, solar, and batteries, which isn't quite what the plan says, it says it's going to use nuclear, but realistically, the way that it's written, nuclear will get basically pushed out of the marketplace. So the cost of electricity in 2019, the whole country spent about $400 billion on electricity in 2019. If you were going to use only wind, solar, and batteries, it would cost $6.6 trillion. So the average household electric bill goes from like $1,200 a year to 19, actually not even household. The additional cost for electricity would be $19,000 per person every single year. So when they say it's a $2 trillion plan, that's a lie. It's not, because if you were going to replace all the electricity that we use right now with renewables and batteries, it would be insanely expensive. It's, like they say a $2 trillion thing, but it wouldn't be. It would be $24 trillion for your electricity over the course of 4 years. It's nuts. 16 trillion.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get into some of the specifics here, because I think that there's some really interesting things. But one thing that I noticed from reading that first draft that's been on his website for a while, on this kind of newer release, it seems like he's really kind of trimmed some of the edges off this and kind of excised some maybe not the most politically correct, I guess. I don't know how to exactly say it, but he took out some of the stuff that I think is unflattering in this original draft when he made the second draft, or whoever in the campaign did it. So I do want to get into some of that stuff, but Justin, just kind of opening thoughts on the whole giant Joe Biden plan. Oh, I'll get to it. But Justin, any opening thoughts on all of this here?
So one of the questions I have two questions. One, actually, both of them are for Isaac. One, Isaac might be able to answer. One, Isaac should be able to answer, but both he might not be able to. Okay. So Let's the first one is, why is it only $2 trillion compared to some of the other plans we've seen, which have supposedly, are going to cost so much more? So, like, for instance, Bernie Sanders' plan, he says Bernie Sanders supported AOC's Green New Deal, but he also had another plan that he put out when he was running for president that sort of stripped all of the other stuff in the Green New Deal that had nothing to do with climate or energy stuff out of it.
Sure.
And he had a climate plan. And his plan was he wanted 100% renewable energy for electricity and transportation by 2030, complete decarbonization by 2050, blah, 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 blah. And it was $16 trillion over 10 years. So 16 trillion is a lot more than 2 trillion. So I agree with you. When I looked at the broad outline of Biden's plan, I thought this seems very similar to the other things that we've seen before. It's like some minor differences, it seems, but I haven't really dug super deep into it. But do you know why they're able to get away with saying 2 trillion, but the other plans we've seen have been more like 12 trillion, 16 trillion, 20 trillion, what's the difference?
So I'm not positive on this, but my thought is the difference is those plans were trying to actually calculate what the cost would be to everybody, whereas this plan basically just says, well, this is what I'm going to spend from the federal government purse. And there's the distinction. I believe that's the case. But again, I'm not sure. And also, I don't think that there's any real justification or basis in reality for any of Biden's numbers for 2 trillion.
Yeah.
I think that they just threw out a number that was big but not too big in order to look, moderate but progressive, right? And I think that also the stimulus package being 2 trillion, we just spent $2 trillion on coronavirus and nobody batted an eye. So I think that it's more of a politically decided upon amount of money rather than, they sat down and crunched the numbers on their own.
No, right. Plan. Yeah, I definitely think it was just like, well, we don't want to make it seem too big, but we also don't want to make it seem too small.
Yeah,
like, how's 3? And they're like, maybe 2's better. And then they just put 2 in there.
I honestly think it's them saying, look, we just spent $2 trillion on coronavirus, and climate change is a much bigger crisis. So nobody can attack us for this.
Okay, I think that makes sense. So the other question I had was that you've mentioned this several times before, and I've always been curious as to what the answer is to this. You mentioned previously that if we were to switch to wind and solar and that sort of thing, and we were to run the entire country on wind and solar, it would be a lot more money, right? It would be a lot more expensive. Even after you build the infrastructure, it would just be more. It'd be more expensive over time, right? So my question is, when this gets posed to people on the left, what they'll say is that actually that's not true. And that, even though people on the right will tell you that this is more expensive because of all the subsidies that wind and solar get and all of this other stuff, if you take those away, it's actually much more expensive. They'll say, yeah, but the oil and gas industry, they get all these subsidies from the government too. And so if we strip that away as well, then actually these things are affordable. I've seen this argument many, many times.
Yep.
So what do you say when people say something like that?
Yeah, I say 2 things. I say, A, fossil fuels are taxpayers. They are net taxpayers. I think something like 33% of New Mexico's budget is paid for by oil and gas royalties. And if you take that away, you actually have to close schools, and you have to shut down, a lot of government services. So from a purely like checkbook standpoint, that's not true. And secondly, they like to talk about externalities. I see some figure from like the World Bank or something that says like, oh, well, fossil fuels get like $178 billion in subsidies. And they claim that not charging them for emitting CO2 into the atmosphere is a subsidy. I'm like, all right, fine. Like if you want to talk about it that way, that's okay. But if you want to also look at it in terms of like the regional grid operator in the Midwest basically said it would be impossible to have a reliable grid using only wind batteries or wind, solar, and batteries. They said that they would need natural gas on the grid at all times, or at least to be ready to come into action when the wind isn't blowing or the sun isn't shining at all times in order to keep the power from going out. I emailed a professor from Stanford last week who's done some work on the cost of the California blackouts from last year. And the preliminary estimate for what those blackouts costs, I mean, they were shutting off the power for millions of people for 4 days at a time, was $10 billion. And that's only looking at the residential and commercial lost productivity. So when you're looking at the overall impact on the GDP, how about the fact that you're going to spend I think it's 10 times more for your electricity than you are now, and you're going to be subject to blackouts? Like, it's a no-brainer that this is way too expensive. And even if you want to count the externalities of fossil fuel emissions, it is a bargain in comparison.
I see. Okay. So you're saying really that these subsidies that these various industries are receiving, they're not substantial enough that it would outweigh the difference between these two in terms of costs and that sort of thing.
No, it's peanuts.
Right. And the other thing that I had thought of, and you didn't mention this just now, but the other thing that I had thought of is that, and it's always made me very skeptical of this, of people who want to rely entirely on green energy sources, is that all of these studies and everything where they talk about the cost of renewable energy, it's all based on these relatively small amounts of renewable energy that they now produce, right? And they're always being produced in these ideal locations. So it's like, you know, when they figure out what the cost of solar is, it's based on the cost of solar when you're only building solar in places where the sun really is shining almost all the time. But if you had to start building solar and wind and running, entire economies on it in places like Minnesota, where, you don't have as much sunshine as you do in like Nevada or something, then obviously that completely changes the cost structure for everything, right? So I thought of that as well. But I mean, but I think you made a lot of good points. I mean, I think there's so much misinformation in this particular arena that it's easy to be thrown off by it. I've heard so many times, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say who are on the left, including people in person who have said this to me, you know, well, oil and gas, they get all these subsidies too. And if we just got rid of all those subsidies, then actually wind and solar would be so much more affordable. They would be so much better than those options. And the only reason you're saying this is because you guys on the right support giving them all of these gigantic subsidies. So I'm glad that you addressed that, because I do think it's an important issue. It's one of their go-to talking points.
Well, and it's such a dumb talking point, because wind and solar get so many more subsidies than fossil fuels do, period, in gross terms anyway. And the only way that they make those arguments is based on like, oh, well, the externality cost. I'm like, okay, so how about the cost of blackouts that fossil fuels are averting by being, you know, available 24/7? Like, I don't know, their brains don't work.
Yeah. Well, the externality thing is garbage too, because they.
Oh, for sure. You can cook the numbers any way you want. But still,
I mean, the thing about externalities when it comes to fossil fuels, because they always tie in all of these harms that are supposedly related to global warming and everything else. And it's like they can just literally, they can make those things up. I mean, they do make them up. It's all fictional. It's just whatever they think it is going to be at some point in the future. It's completely imaginary based on models that they're just creating out of thin air. So they don't actually have a real, true cost for these externalities. I mean, I'm sure there are externalities. There are externalities for everything, when you're talking on this scale, but
there's a reason why every single hospital has a diesel generator to back it up when the power goes out, potentially. It's not a solar panel. It's not a wind turbine. It's a diesel generator, because if you don't have that, people will die.
Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that, but it's one thing that I kind of noticed.
You're a bad person, Donnie.
When reading through this is some of it is just like hinges on, like, they just don't even know yet. Like, there's a whole section that they have to invest in getting like battery technology up to where it needs to be to kind of make any of this work. And it's like, okay, well, what if you don't? What if you don't get that to work? What if like the innovation that you're expecting when it comes to batteries don't reach the level to make this work? Then what? Like, we're already on an irreversible path towards, complete renewable energy by 2035. So that's kind of one thing that I noticed during this. And when I was talking about it with a colleague of mine, I was like, this all just kind of seems like a magic act. Like when you're standing there and there's a magician up on the stage and he makes a rabbit disappear, like you're just like, oh, wow, cool. Yeah, that was convincing. He really looked like he made that rabbit disappear. But then if you start like focusing in on certain details and just like, look how he's holding his hat and like, look how he like that puff of smoke happened over here. And it's just like, oh, yeah, once you start pointing that out, it really seems to fall apart. Yeah. And like, so Isaac, you just mentioned the school bus thing. It mentions in here, there's a section that talks about how they want to get all of the school buses or all the buses in, it says here, set a goal that all new American-built buses be zero emissions by 2030, which will create significant demand for the manufacturing of new clean American-built buses utilizing American-manufactured inputs, which right there is just like the biggest broken window fallacy in the world. Like, if we just destroyed all of the windows, think about all the jobs created and demand for building new windows, but whatever. And accelerate the progress by converting all 500,000 school buses in our country, including diesel, into zero emissions. So 500,000 school buses. How much does like your average electric school bus cost? Like, just take a guess. I don't know. Like $50,000? Isaac?
Electric school bus? I know the answer, so I don't need to guess.
What is it?
Well, I haven't heard all of you guys guess.
I said 50,000. I said
50,000.
Okay, Justin, what are you saying?
I would say, I'm going to say $50,001, Bob.
I respect that. You guys are both. Well, Justin wins because
that's right. Damn right, I won.
Yeah. Whoa, Justin, language. Kids listen to this show.
How dare you?
Exactly. So actually, an electric school bus costs $290,000.
What?
Oh,
So
man.
Justin, you win the showcase showdown.
Yeah, that's incredible. It
It
actually
So that
doesn't. It's not that surprising though. I guess.
No, it isn't. But guess how much a normal diesel school bus costs?
I have no idea. $50,000.
All right, Justin. you can go
2001.
first. Yeah. All right. So Donnie wins this round. Man, weird how that works. It's $90,000. So you're paying more than 3 times the cost for an electric school bus as you do a diesel school bus,
All right.
and you can't even use it as much.
So 500,000 school buses all being replaced by electric school buses, which are $290,000 each. So multiplying those together, we're looking at $145 billion just for this one little bullet point of this like 20-page document. So that's kind of what I'm saying. When you zero in on some of these little details, it's just like the illusion just kind of fades away.
Well, and then also, and you're absolutely right, and that's such an important part of all of this, because even that, you look at that and you say, oh well, it's going to cost $40 billion or whatever you just said to do that. Yeah, but that doesn't even factor in that those buses might not last as long as a diesel powered bus.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now you got to replace the buses more often, or maybe the repair costs are higher, right? Because it's electric vehicles, and how many mechanics out there are experts on electric vehicles right now, right? So you would have all these other costs. I mean, if you have to replace those buses 5 years earlier than you would normally replace a bus over the course of, 30 years or something, 30, 40 years, you're spending hundreds of billions of dollars more probably than you would ordinarily spend. So, and again, it's just one bullet point. It's just one bullet point. So, yeah. I mean, it really is amazing. I remember when Barack Obama ran for president, and the first time, and you would go through his, I don't know if you guys did this, but you would go through his plans, his various plans for what he wanted to do in America. It was all super broad stuff with no specifics at all. And it was almost impossible to criticize so much of what he did because he had no track record at that time. He was just a state senator from Illinois, and that was pretty much it, right? And then he went to the U.S. Senate, right? After that, he served like one term or something, and then he was president of the United States. He had basically no track record, and he had all these plans with no details in it. But this time around, this batch of Democrats, maybe because of Elizabeth Warren, honestly, if you're going to give her credit for anything, maybe it's Elizabeth Warren who deserves credit for this. They all have these ultra specific plans with all these details in it, like replacing school buses. It's like, who would have even dreamed of coming up with that? Like Barack Obama would never have done that, ever. He would never have done something that specific because it's too easy to look at it and say, well, this is stupid. It doesn't even make sense. So we're going to spend $140 billion extra dollars on school buses now when they're all going to run on electric.
Here's another one. This is a perfect little tee up for you, Justin. There's another, just one of these bullet points, and it says sparking the second great railroad revolution.
Wait a second. You got to stay on the bus thing a little longer. Did you even read my tragic school bus article, Donald?
No, I didn't. I don't follow you in Parler.
Because you would be serving me up a hot, tasty take right now. Basically, electric vehicles don't drive as far in the winter because you have to use the range of the battery in order to heat the bus. And like in Duluth, Minnesota, they actually have a diesel powered engine on the electric bus to generate heat. So basically, electric cars are super efficient, right? They take all the energy that's stored in the battery and they convert it into usable energy, whereas internal combustion engines are not as efficient. And they produce a lot of heat that is waste heat in the summertime. But in the winter, you can use that and you can utilize that to heat the cabin. So on an electric bus, you're basically potentially reducing the range of the bus by 40% when it's cold outside. That's a problem in cold parts of the country, especially in rural areas. And in one instance, like 2 years ago in St. Paul, there was a snowstorm and these buses got stuck in the snow, and kids were on these buses for hours. Yeah, hours. Some kids didn't get home until 1 o'clock in the morning. More than 300 students were stuck on buses or in schools between 10 p.m. and midnight. Those kids, depending on how cold it is, could be in a lot of danger. Frankly,
They'd be dead.
Yeah, you could be
frostbite.
dead. No, but honestly, kids could die from this plan, and nobody's talking about that. And the problem with this is, like, if you're in a diesel-powered school bus and you are low on fuel and you're stuck in a snowstorm, somebody could theoretically throw a couple 5-gallon jugs of diesel fuel on a snowmobile, go out there and refuel it, so you could at least keep the kids warm during all of this. But nobody's running an extension cord to a bus in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
So, like, this is insane. This is dangerous. And everyone's like, oh, great, he just wants all the kids to get to school safe. And this is stupid.
Yeah, no, it's
what it sounds to me is like Isaac is calling for a nationwide extension cord plan.
Yes,
we have to have extension cords everywhere.
Yeah, blimps that just go around the country with extension cords that reach the ground, ready for any instance of kids potentially freezing to death. No, the reason why I was shifting away from the buses thing was just because, like, this is just one bullet point out of like 150 that are on this that we can kind of dissect if we really wanted to.
Sure.
So I was transitioning to the sparking, and I don't really want to get bogged down on this one either, but it's just another one of these examples. Sparking the second great railroad revolution. It talks about trying to increase fast and clean and safe rail around the world. Yeah, it says around the world, but I guess around the country. But, like, you know, we've talked on this podcast a number of times about the high-speed rail that they were trying to get from
California.
In California.
LA to San Francisco.
LA to San Francisco, and like 10 years later, they only got like it was just
from Merced to Bakersfield.
Without even a train on the track. Like, it was just so bad. So the idea that we're going to be able to do that, take that idea and multiply it across the entire world, apparently, is just preposterous. And again, that's just one bullet point on here.
The world makes as much sense as the country. They might as well run with that.
Yeah, I guess so.
Totally insane. So think about all the jobs we could do if we built a new channel from California to Beijing or something.
Let's do it.
Well, that
we could create millions of new jobs. Yeah. Think of all the transportation woes that would be solved if we could just take a train tunnel to Hawaii and then to China. I mean, you might as well.
So then, so I referenced the idea that, like, this older version kind of had some stuff that I think was edited out for this newer version. And some of the things, like, one is to do with nuclear power. And it says in this one that basically it's just going to be about investigating it, seeing if we want to do it. And that's about it. That's all they really talked about it. In the newer one, they actually talk about maybe even doing some of that. But in the old version, it's just like, yeah, we'll look into it. But, like, the fact that we're going to, like, transition everything by 2035, it's like, you better look into it quick if you're going to make that part of your plan. Yeah. But so that kind of was taken out. In the part where they're talking about infrastructure, they leave out this part that was in the original document that says mitigating the climate impact of urban sprawl. It says housing policy can be used as a tool to battle climate change and expand the middle class. Many lower and middle income Americans are forced to live far away from job centers due to high housing costs, leading not only to workers being overburdened by long commutes, but also to higher emissions associated with increased traffic and extra long commuting times. Altering local regulations to eliminate sprawl and allow for denser, more affordable housing near public transit would cut commute times for many Americans, blah, 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 blah. So that I just kind of found weird and a little outdated considering recent events, that we want to eliminate sprawl. Have you heard of this language? Is this like getting rid of suburbs or trying to, like, narrow it down and to have high density residential centers? Like, that seems a little creepy, and especially in, like, this day and age.
Forever.
Well, I know that it's kind of like, it even kind of seeds back to Agenda 21 type stuff.
Why did you say that, Donnie? Now we have no credibility.
In this day and age.
Edit that out.
But no, I mean, but that's been part of
shave your head and edit that out.
Environmental plans for a while. But in this day and age, where people are leaving population centers because of fear of coronavirus and buildings being burnt down. It's just that part of the plan, like, maybe they left that out on purpose.
Could be.
But
I don't
know.
That's really a strange thing to put in there.
Yeah, very
it's
strange.
Really, and so much of this stuff, and that's the other thing too, right? It's like with Biden, I just get the strong sense that so much of what he's doing is not directed toward normal people, like at all. Sure. And that is like a great example of it. It's like, why would if you want to win an election in the Midwest, like these are the places you need to win. You need to win Michigan. You need to win Wisconsin. If you're Joe Biden, you got to win those states back. Trump won those states. You got to win those states back. Why would you put stuff in there that talks about urban sprawl and stuff like that? And I think the answer is truly because he knows regular people are not going to read this thing. They're not going to know what's in it.
Sure.
This is all directed towards the far left part of his party and the far left part of his campaign. He wants to keep those people happy. He knows this election isn't about him. And so, frankly, he could put anything he wants in there. He could put literally anything in there. And as long as it makes the far left happy, he probably would get away with it because who the heck is going to buy? No regular person even cares who Joe Biden is. They haven't even seen him. He's been hiding in his basement for most of the past 3 months.
I mean, it definitely seems like he can put anything in here. And I'm wondering, based on what you said about how Bernie Sanders' plan was $16 trillion over 10 years, where Biden's plan is much less than that cost. It's only over 4 years, but still, if you break it down by year, it's still much less. But I'm wondering if there was anything that was left out of this, because you're going through and there's just like unlimited things. Every section is just filled with the things that they would spend money on. In fact, I think one of the biggest accomplishments of this entire document is how many synonyms that they come up with for spending government money. So they have like this one sentence here. It says Biden will use all the levers of the federal government, from purchasing power, R&D, tax, trade, and investment policies, to reverse this trend and position America to be the global leader in manufacture of electric vehicles. So I scribbled down a note that this sentence should actually be: Biden will use all the levers of the federal government, from spending, taxes, spending, and spending policies, to reverse this trend and position America to be the global leader, yada, 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 yada. But I'm just wondering, like, what got left off? Like if Bernie's plan and the Green New Deal, and I know the Green New Deal had all of those other social programs in it, but like just the environment portion of that, like what was left off? What's not in here? Because seemingly everything else is.
That was sort of the question I had asked Isaac before, in a way. Yeah. I mean, I don't understand what isn't in here. I mean, I know that some of the social justice stuff is not as prominent in here, and there's some of it in there, but it's not quite as prominent. I think Bernie, I could be wrong. I don't know if this plan is so long, it's possible I missed it, but Bernie's plan, if I remember right, had a pretty expensive provision for providing people who had been displaced workers with basically like full income or something to that effect.
Sure.
In other words, if you're a person who works in the fracking industry, now you've lost your job, Bernie was going to take care of you by, providing you with an income, basically. I don't know if there's anything like that in Biden's plan. There may not be anything like that.
Yeah, maybe, but his plan is based around it's going to create millions of jobs, and everyone's just going to be...
Bernie's. So is Bernie's, right? But what are you going to do for these people who live in South Dakota, and those millions of jobs being created just aren't going to go to them, right?
So there's two other main parts that I want to get to, and I think we got about 15 minutes, so I want to get to these. So section 3 of this is the newer one, and I'll post these things in the show notes. You don't want to read them, but just in case you want to refer to it. It talks about rally the rest of the world to address the grave climate threat. And it acknowledges that the United States accounts for only 15% of global CO2 emissions. And it kind of it talks a lot about the Paris Climate Accord and why, that was so important that we needed that, considering the fact that we're only 15% of global emissions. It says to catalyze this effort, Biden will, in his first 100 days in office, convene a climate World Summit to directly engage the leaders of major carbon-emitting nations of the world, or China, to persuade them to join the United States in making more ambitious national pledges above and beyond the commitments they've already made, I assume, in the Climate Accord. Lead the world to lock in enforceable international agreements to reduce emissions in the global shipping and aviation. And then, so that was kind of one of the big things about the Climate Accord. It's like, all right, we're all signing on to it, but there's no punishment for not doing anything. So why are these countries going to do anything? Turns out they didn't do anything, because what's making them do it? It says, but then this is where it kind of gets really interesting with China. It says, we can no longer separate trade policy from our climate objectives. Biden will not allow other nations, including China, to game the system by becoming destination economies for polluters, undermining our climate efforts and exploiting American workers and businesses. Now, again, this is in the first draft of this, not the newer one. But like the idea that he's going to seemingly invoke trade war type stuff to enforce China to go along with some of these climate things, I wasn't expecting to read that in this. But I mean, it almost seems like you have to. When we talk about that, like China has twice the amount of emissions that we do, and they don't seem to be reversing course. Like, what are you going to do? Seems like Joe Biden's advocating for trade wars here.
China's putting a new power plant on the grid like every couple days. Like, this is not realistic at all. And by increasing the cost of energy in the United States, we are basically telling our manufacturers that use a lot of electricity to basically pack their bags and go somewhere else. So this is totally, like, anybody who knows anything about energy is going to see through this. Unfortunately, not enough people know. So, Justin, what were you going to say?
Well, I mean, I think that he's trying to address that problem by basically forcing everybody else in the world to go along with this, or else he's going to start a trade war with them. I mean, I think that's what he seems to be suggesting here. So he seems to be saying, if China doesn't go along with this, then we're going to have a trade war with China, and we're going to make them go along with it. And then that way, people can't go to China and escape China, escape America's higher energy costs. There's a couple of interesting things with that, though. Number one, it's an admission that renewable energy is much more expensive than fossil fuels. Because if it weren't, then why the heck would I abandon America for China? I mean, the very premise of the whole provision is proof that their plan is more expensive than what the existing system is. And not just a little bit, a lot. Because they're so worried that businesses are going to pack up by the droves and leave to go to the other side of the world to go work in under a communist authoritarian regime, that's going to be more affordable for them to do that than to just pay for solar energy down the street. I mean, that kind of proves the point that this is wildly, expensive, this whole plan that they're putting together. But the whole concept of putting a massive trade war in place to beat China is also pretty incredible, really, when you think about it. Because if you were to actually do this, if you were to actually go to China and say, you know what, you guys are a bunch of polluters, and you're not holding up to your end of the bargain here in this new Paris Climate Agreement type thing that we've just come up with, and because of that, we're now going to slap all these tariffs on you, and we're not going to buy any more of your products until you guys change your ways. It's like putting China in a situation where they're going to lose money or they're going to lose money, right? So why would they say bow down to Joe Biden in this situation and give him what he wants by building all of these much more expensive forms of energy? Why would they rather do that than just either pay the tariffs or just send their products elsewhere? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. The other thing is, America has no leverage with China, like very little leverage with China.
Right.
I mean, that's such an important thing for people to understand. Like, we owe China money. This is like going to the credit card company and saying, like, I don't like your building and your advertisements. I know I owe you $20,000, but if you don't change your ads, you're not getting a nickel. And they're going to look at you and say, what? Like, you owe us money. What are you talking about? You know, I mean, that's the thing. And then the consequences of this are only bad for America. So if China goes along with it, it costs more money for them to produce energy, which means it costs more money for them to produce products, which means it costs more money for us to buy the products, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a tax on the consumer.
Yeah. Or they slap tariffs on them, and it costs more money for us to buy the products.
Well,
Under what scenario does the regular person in America make out in this trade war? They don't at all. In all scenarios, we lose.
Well, Justin, just like the Babylon Bee reported, according to the World Health Organization, only conservative protests spread the coronavirus. So only Donald Trump's trade war hurts consumers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the crazy thing about all this.
And I didn't even get a chance to mention that, but that's exactly right. The same people who were going insane over Trump's trade policies with all these different countries, whether you like them or not, is sort of irrelevant. The point is they were going insane over them, and now they're calling for a much bigger trade war. It's like saying, we don't like it when you shoot people, so let's nuke them instead. This is crazy. This is totally crazy. And again, everybody in America loses as a result of this. America does not win under any scenario. It's a no-win scenario for Biden. So I'm not surprised that they pulled this out. But it is interesting that they pulled it out, but they also have left this plan up on his website. So you can still go read this whole plan on his website. Right. It's not even necessarily, he never says in his, as far as we know, right? I don't know of any example of this. Does he ever say that he was wrong, that he shouldn't have had this? You know, that this isn't part of his plan? I haven't heard that anywhere. I don't see that anywhere. So as far as I know, this is still part of the plan. It's just on a different part of the website. It's not part of the infrastructure plan, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. But again, there's just a million of these things. He talks about targeting airline emissions. Aviation accounts for 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions. That portion is expected to increase. Unfortunately, today, few low-carbon technologies or fuels have been developed to tackle this challenge. Biden recognizes himself in the mirror. Oh, wait, no, sorry. Biden recognizes that that must change and will pursue measures to incentivize the creation of new sustainable fuels for aircrafts, as well as other changes in technology, aircraft technology and standards, and air traffic management. So that's cool. I guess Biden's going to pursue some type of new airline fuel. That's kind of new to me. I don't know. We'll look into that.
This is, and again, so okay, so yeah, all right, so we're gonna invent this new fuel, I guess. That's the plan. Invent a new fuel. Well, and so then, how much is that gonna cost? The regular people who have to fly on the plane with this new fuel,
I don't know, man.
It's madness.
I don't know. Madness. Like I said, everything is in here.
And this is why his cost estimates are just stupid, right? Because there's really, it's not actually reflecting the cost to Americans.
Right. How much of the $2 trillion is the new magic fuel that they're creating?
The magic fuel bus, man.
How much does that cost? What, $20 trillion? What does it take to build a whole new fuel that we've never heard of before? Right?
Yeah. I mean, he talks about, he has a whole section about trying to get electric vehicles industry up and going in the United States. And he says that he would use the power of federal procurement, which is, again, spending. So use the power of federal spending to increase demand for American-made, American-sourced clean vehicles. So basically that means that any federal government vehicle is just going to be, they're just going to purchase an electric one, right? So that's just one kind of small bullet point of all of this.
Well, that's actually a huge bullet point, depending on what they mean by that. Because I'm guessing, is the military a federal vehicle? Because if it is, we're screwed.
We got to replace all those tanks with solar-powered tanks.
That's right. Who's got?
I mean, don't worry, Isaac. They're just going to throw that new fuel in there, and everything's going to be great. those tanks they're going to be like jets, man. They're just going to be flying across the desert. Like, this is just, this is insane. I mean, and what is the, like, again, like, is it algae? You're talking about algae fuel? Like, what is this? You're right, Isaac, you're right. These tanks, and we've talked about this a long time ago when we were doing the Green New Deal stuff. Like, the whole concept of these alternative fuels and all this other stuff, are they going to be powerful enough to run tanks and missiles and aircraft carriers and like heavy machinery and stuff that you can't plug a crane into an outlet in the wall and run a crane on it. Like, you can't plug a jet plane into a wall socket and just like, fly across the world and shoot missiles at terrorists. Like, you can't do that kind of stuff. It's literally impossible. So what are they even talking about? Like, where are they getting these things? It's fantasy land. Like, they live in fantasy land. All of this is fantasy land.
So there's just one other like kind of bit that I want to get to in this last like 5 minutes. And this is a little bit more of a serious one, but this is just full of just goofy stuff that we could do 8
shows on this thing.
We could, and we probably will cover some of this next week too. But it says, so first off, Biden's like Build Back Better plan.
Yeah.
Okay. So just kind of remember that because Justin's going to talk about it. But it also talks about, it says enacting a national strategy to develop low carbon manufacturing sector in every state. And it says allocate tax credits, so government spending, and subsidies, government spending, will be available for businesses to upgrade equipment and processes, invest in expanded or new factories, and deploy low-carbon technologies, as long as all stakeholders are part of the process of determining a bottom-line win for jobs, workers, clean energy, and low-term community investment. So this idea of the Build Back Better plan and stakeholder capitalism, those are both terms that come straight out of the World Economic Forum and all of their talk about the Great Reset and all of that, globalist socialism stuff. So yeah, Justin, I kind of saved that little bit there when it's like, these companies can reinvest in all of these new technologies as long as all the stakeholders, including employees or just people in the community or anyone affected by the distribution chain here, are okay with it. So yeah, boom, Biden, stakeholder capitalism. Take it away, Justin.
Yeah, he said, I think it was a week ago or so, he gave a speech in Pennsylvania where he said we have to end the era of shareholder capitalism.
Yeah,
and have a totally new system. Now, that era of shareholder capitalism is literally like word for word right out of all sorts of Great Reset language, documents, all kinds of different things. And interestingly, Build Back Better plan, which is a stupid name.
Yeah, I thought he came up with that on his own.
Yeah, I thought so too, because it sounds like something that Joe Biden, while he's feeding pigeons on a park bench, would come up with that, the Build Back Better plan. But it turns out that this is also just from all this World Economic Forum stuff that they've been talking about, the Build Back Better plan, for years and years and years. I found documents from 2016 where they were talking about doing the exact same kinds of things that Joe Biden is talking about now as part of this new economy that they want to build. And they call it Build Back Better plan. They just published an article. I mean, there's literally dozens of things that the World Economic Forum has done on the Build Back Better plan. It's definitely a connection to Biden. There's no doubt about it. There's no way this is a coincidence. Yeah. But earlier in July, they published an article, and this could not be any clearer, on the World Economic Forum's own website. And it's called, this is the title of the article, "To Build Back Better, we must reinvent capitalism. Here's how." And then the whole article is basically laying out stuff that's very similar to what Joe Biden says. An inclusive and green economy is vital if we're to create more resilient economies and a world in which businesses can thrive, not just now, but long into the future. And it goes on to talk about building, the way you build back better is through all of this green stimulus and all of these, same things that are in his own plan. I mean, he's literally taking this stuff and just repurposing it for himself. There is definitely, we have found a document We're not gonna bring it up now because there's just not enough time to talk about it. It's too juicy. But we have found a document that does seem to be the source of where a lot of this Biden Build Back Better plan, all of this resiliency stuff, where it's come directly from the World Economic Forum, directly from the Great Reset.
Yeah.
And they're literally taking talking points from the World Economic Forum and using them, and not just using talking points, but building an entire platform around something that the World Economic Forum is putting together as part of their plan to eliminate capitalism. Like that's literally what is happening.
And like this has been one of the main targets of our Stopping Socialism project. So we've done a video on Joe Biden talking about this moving from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism, which is just like
I'm never invited to be on those.
You can be on it. But so if you are interested in that,
what about me and Jim?
No,
you guys are so selfish.
Veto.
So if you're interested in that topic, this Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, this idea of this 21st century socialism, you can follow all of our Stopping Socialism stuff on. We do videos on YouTube, Stopping Socialism TV. You can go to stoppingsocialism.com. Facebook, Stopping Socialism. We also have an Instagram account and a Parler account to find out all of that good stuff. We'll definitely be tracking Joe Biden, as it seems like he's just kind of walking this World Economic Forum line. But gentlemen, we are out of time here. Any last words of wisdom? Anything else you want to get off your chest before we sign off for the week?
Can someone in one of these campaigns please come up with a platform that doesn't sound so stupid? Like, why are these names always so stupid? Why are they always so dumb? Like the Build Back Better plan. Like that is trash.
Yeah, I honestly thought that he came up with that on his own.
Yeah,
like, that's how bad it was.
I thought actually when we heard it in that speech that it may have just been him like ad-libbing, like he created it on the spot.
Yeah.
You know, it's like building. You know, we gotta build back our country better. I call it the Build Back Better plan. And I literally thought he made it up right there because that's how he did it. He like stumbled into it, and I'm like, did he just decide to call it that right then and there? Turns out no. Turns out even with a teleprompter feeding him the information and whole documents, strategy documents telling him how he should present this idea, he still managed to like stumble his way through it because he's incapable of putting together two sentences without sounding like a complete moron.
Yeah, so to kind of put a little cap on all of this Biden plan, which I'm sure we'll talk about, is full of malarkey. The whole thing. It's not the bottom. It's nothing but malarkey. It's like the wish list. It's the Green New Deal.
It's the most malarkey.
All of that. It's total malarkey. But anyways, if you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. We greatly appreciate it. Join us every Friday for a new episode of In the Tank. If you'd like to follow us, you can on Twitter. I'm just so used to saying it. In the Tank Pod. Twitter's terrible. If you'd like, you can email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Be greatly appreciated. Justin, where can the fine people find you?
They can find me on Facebook and Socialist Twitter at Justin T. Haskins. They can also find me on Parler soon at Justin T. Haskins. The account is up, but I've decided I'm not actually going to post anything until they give me a verified badge. I'm holding out like I'm going to fight with them until they give me what I want.
Or where can the fine people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at J Lakely and at Heartland Inst.
And the fracking guy. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Talk to you next week.